We are keeping a very close eye on Vienna, where there are reports an announcement of an Iranian nuclear deal could come at any time. Diplomats from Iran and 6 major world powers, including the United States, are meeting again Tuesday morning. They've been negotiating for 17 days in the Austrian capital and off and on for a number of years. Under a deal, Iran would restrict its nuclear program in return for relief from economic sanctions. Now, the specifics of a possible agreement are not yet clear. There are also reports that the major remaining sticking points are full access to Iranian centrifuges and the potential lifting of a United Nations arms embargo. Margaret Brennan has more from Vienna.
Here's what we know about the emerging deal. According to U.S. officials, Iran's nuclear program will be frozen for at least a decade. Iran will cut its centrifuges from 19,000 down to around 6,000, and if Iran complies, economic sanctions will be lifted. Now, the final 100-page agreement has been held up by an argument over exactly when to peel back restrictions on Iran's ability to buy and sell weapons, including missiles, and precisely how much access weapons inspectors will get to all of Iran's nuclear facilities, including military sites, is still under discussion. Margaret Brennan, CBS News, Vienna.
CBS News senior national security analyst Juan Zarate joins us now from Washington to talk all about this. Juan, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Vlad.
Understanding that we don't know anything, if there is a deal, what would you expect it to look like?
Well, the main sticking points have been the access to military sites and the more sensitive nuclear sites that the Iranians have held out against. And so there's going to have to be some detail about what the potential for inspections and verification looks like. That's been a major point of contention, as you heard from Margaret, a major part of the negotiations, and certainly something that Congress has raised. Secondly, we're going to want to see the details around sanctions unwinding. What does that look like? The Iranians have been pushing a maximalist position, trying to get the lifting of sanctions immediately upon the signing of the deal. They know that's not really possible given the nature of the sanctions regime, and so we'll have to see how that plays out. Finally, we'll have to see what this final issue that the Iranians injected, this issue of arms and ballistic missile embargo, whether or not that forms part of a deal. They clearly threw that in as a wild card to try to strengthen their position, and we'll have to see how that plays out. And so those are 3 of the key elements of a deal that we're going to have to look closely at the details in order to understand how this will play out.
You know, Juan, a lot of people are wondering, if there is a deal, how does the United States and its partners ensure that Iran sticks to its word?
Well, Vlad, that's the major point of contention here. Fundamentally, do we trust that the Iranians will honor the deal that they sign? And whether or not that is even possible, given that the Supreme Leader, Khamenei, has often appeared to be contradicting his negotiators. And so, first and foremost, there's going to be a question as to whether or not the regime as a whole actually accepts what's on paper. And secondly, whether or not the types of inspections and verification that may even be in the deal are going to be honored, whether or not Iran over time will slip, whether or not there will be minor infractions that over time build up. And so you're going to see a lot of questions, a lot of skepticism, certainly from Congress, around whether or not you can even believe what the Iranians sign on the dotted line.
And Juan, you know, when we look at this and we look at this potential deal, understanding that Iran is active in 4 countries around the region, around the Middle East. You're talking Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Lebanon. And in each of those instances are not necessarily on the same side as they might be in another country. So how does a deal like this affect the balance of power in the region?
Well, it has major implications potentially, Vlad, and how this deal is read by not just the U.S. and not just the negotiating partners, the P5+1, but also Israel, our Sunni Arab allies like the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, even the Turks. All of that matters because what you have here is a potential shift in the perception of the balance of power. Because if the Iranians are seen now to be an accepted nuclear power, even if it's delayed, even if it's constricted in some way, that will raise the question as to whether or not Iran will be emboldened, whether or not they will be more aggressive, whether or not sanctions relief will give them more resources to bring to bear in these various conflicts that you've mentioned. And suddenly it may present the problem of proliferation in the heart of the Middle East. And that's been one of the great fears of those who've been critical of this deal, and certainly those that have been worried about Iranian nuclear capabilities, that this will unleash a reshaping of the balance of power and a nuclear arms race in the heart of the Middle East.
All right, we will be watching, as I know you will, Juan Zarate in Washington. Thank you so much, Juan.